Hey folks, welcome to 2021 and welcome back to the Oklahoma State University Archives Live. My name is Olivia Turner and I'm joined today with David Peters, the head archivist here at the OSU Library. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a wonderful new year.
Happy New Year. Typically, people associate the new year with hopes for great projects in the future, but it means more than just that. It's also a time to reflect on previous years and those who made those years great too. This month, the library is focusing on Edmon Low, an innovative librarian who has had lasting impacts here at OSU. Mr. Lowe came to Oklahoma A&M in 1940 and stayed as the head librarian until his retirement in 1967. But David, how did Mr. Lowe come to get this position?
So in the old days, it was a little easier. In 1939, I think it was September of 39, President Bennett, along with, I think, two deans, I think it was the Dean of Engineering and the Dean of Commerce, which is now the School of Business, along with the department head. That was the search committee. And they looked across the nation for someone they thought would be a good fit here. And then in March, they took the name of Edmond Low to the Board of Agriculture. We didn't have a Board of Regents at the time, so they took his name to the Board of Agriculture. They nominated him as the candidate, as the only candidate, and the board approved that. And so Lowe then starts, I think he starts in the fall of 1940, but it was a small search committee headed by Bennett. Bennett found the man he wanted, and that was Edmond Low.
Awesome. How much did he accomplish in his time here?
So he has the longest tenure of any librarian here at OSU. And so what did he accomplish? Well, he accomplished a great deal. When he comes, the library, the building, is located over where the Alumni Association is now. And then there was a small addition. And actually the library was scattered all over campus. There were little smaller libraries. One of the things Lowe did with the development of this building was to bring everybody together in one place. He really brought in kind of stability, standards. He started looking at our reputation, not only in the state, but nationwide. And so he really just brought a lot of integrity to the library. We weren't in bad shape before him, but he really developed a national reputation, and the library developed a national reputation under his direction.
What did his colleagues think of him?
Well, they respected him. First of all, he had experience at other colleges and universities, and so he had a well-rounded background. He was very cordial and polite. He was a very kind of dignified gentleman, but he treated everyone fairly, and I think they respected him. And so not only did his staff really appreciate his personality. I mean, he would spend a great deal of time training people, staff people, whatever, new people coming in. And so he really built relationships with people, and it started within the library community itself here on campus. And then also his established relationships with other colleagues in the university community, and then very quickly established relationships with his colleagues across the state and in this region. So I think he was well respected.
Awesome. If you are just now tuning in, this is the Oklahoma State University Archives Live. This month we are talking about Edmond Low, the man behind the Edmond Low Library. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to drop it in the comment section below. Also, while you're at it, include what your favorite thing about the Edmond Low Library is. Mine is the amazing views you get on campus when you're studying on the second, third, or fourth floor. David, what's your favorite thing about the library?
Well, my favorite view of the library is on the fourth floor on the south side looking across the library lawn. I think that's a beautiful location up there. I was in the basement for a long time, and my office was in the center of the building for a long time. And so my second favorite view is now my view out of my office. My office is on the second floor, but I get to look out over that lawn between Engineering South and Classroom Building, looking at the Spears School. And so right now I have a wonderful view in my office, which most people don't get to see, but I do.
Awesome. So we're going to continue with Mr. Lowe. What was his relationship like with OSU's presidents?
He had a wonderful relationship with President Bennett. In fact, I think he saw Bennett as kind of a mentor. Lowe was very accomplished, but Bennett was the one who really kind of nurtured his talents in building relationships, greater relationships than he had in the past, reaching out to business leaders, to the legislature and political leadership. And so Bennett served as a mentor for Lowe, and they had a very close relationship. They were both, in some ways, kind of dreamers. Bennett had this dream for this wonderful expansion of campus and growth of campus, and Lowe had a similar dream for the role that the library played in that. And Bennett also recognized the importance of a well-grounded, well-resourced academic library. And so the two just got along marvelously. And Lowe had a direct connection to Bennett. If he needed something, he could go directly to Dr. Bennett and ask for things. And they worked very closely in both the planning for this building. Of course, then Bennett passed before it was completed, but they'd worked for over 10 years in the preparation to the construction of this facility. And they had a very, very close relationship. When Dr. Willem replaced President Bennett, Willem and Lowe never really connected. And I'm not sure what happened there, but he no longer, fairly quickly, a vice president was named who then headed the academic divisions and units and colleges. And so now there was a person between Lowe and the president. Now there was a third party involved. And slowly during Willem's tenure, the position of the librarian, head librarian or dean of the libraries, slowly just kind of diminished. He wasn't invited to the executive committee meeting. He wasn't even included in the academic council meeting. And so there was a breakdown there somehow. And the relationship that Bennett had with Willem was just not the quality one he had with Bennett. So Lowe, his last president, briefly, President Com was president for the last year that Lowe was head of the library. And Com began to rebuild that relationship with the library on campus and invited Lowe to then participate like in academic council, those kinds of things. So his by far his best relationship was with Bennett. His most challenging was with Willem, and then it began to kind of revive again under Com, but that was just a very short period of time.
So you kind of mentioned about how Bennett and Edmon Low worked really closely with facilitating this building and stuff like that. How did it come to be named after Edmon Low?
So Lowe was forced to retire at age 65. So that happened, like you said, in 1967. He had turned 65. So that by June 30th that year, he had to retire. So he goes on, he doesn't quit. He goes back to the University of Michigan, where he had taught in the summers for a number of years earlier in his career, and had gotten one of his, I believe he got his master's degree from the University of Michigan. Anyway, he goes back to the University of Michigan and teaches on the faculty there for a while. Ends up at a small school in Florida, but 10 years after he retired from here, so that's 1977, it was decided to name the building in his honor. And so they brought him back to campus, and I think they had a ceremony. It was in early April of 1977 that they decided it was well past due, but he'd gone for a while, and now they invited him back to name the facility for him. And it was quite an honor, but he deserved it. He
definitely did. What was the construction process for the library like? Like, how long did it take to build? What did it look like? Stuff like that.
So there was a series of issues regarding the construction. First of all, Washington Street used to run through campus. And so it ran right through where the library is now. The library was planned at the same time the student union were planned to be constructed. They had the same similar financing and planning, I think the same construction company. The problem is the merchants on the south side of Washington Street, south of campus, didn't want them to close Washington. They liked the fact that traffic was flowing through. And so they started construction of the Union about a year or two before they were able to start construction of the library. So they were late getting to the library. It's not until May, I think it's May of 1950, they finally have the groundbreaking ceremony, the opening up of the construction. But by then the funding had gotten kind of messed up. And so Bennett said, well, he's going to go ahead and start construction. And one of his associate deans said, well, how can you start construction without any money? He goes, I'm going to dig a hole. It doesn't cost me anything to dig a hole. So he started digging the hole for the library. And he just said, if they don't provide money, they'll have to walk by this big gaping hole in the ground until they do. And so, but they started construction fairly soon. They got all the financing figured out. I don't want to mean to get lost in the weeds here. So they started construction, and by February of 1953, so really less than 3 years later, the building is completed. It's not officially dedicated until May of 1953, but in February they begin moving some of the books and other materials from the old library and the other library locations on campus to this facility. So it took quite a while to move in.
That is interesting. And it's always interesting to see how someone's hard work has paid off in such a great way, especially when it comes to the community level. You know, students at OSU use the library more for just simply studying. It's not just about that. So we can use it for student jobs, or we can use it for the creative studios, or even just a place to break and have a place to eat if we need it. And times like that and things like that and services like that make it great for students here to have successful times here. What I want to know is what I'm so sorry, I keep just messing up. What your favorite memory here at Edmon Low is. And while you're at it, go ahead and include any questions or comments you have down in the comments section below. In the meantime, while you are doing that, am going to be reading a letter that someone has written about Edmon Low. This is from Miss Jill Holmes. She says, a cataloging professor of mine at Texas Women's University taught a library science course at the University of Michigan, as did Edmon Low. In 1963, he asked her if she had a recommendation for a graduating MLS student of hers for a position at OSU. She gave him my name, and he invited me to come for an interview in May of 1963. When I arrived at the OSU library, he talked to me in his office and then took me to Calvin Brewer, who was the serials librarian at the time. The plan to go into effect was that Mary Graves was retiring as a head of physical sciences and engineering, plus the architecture library. She was the only librarian responsible for all of that. Calvin, at the end of the summer, was being made head of physical sciences and engineering, and Sarah McAlpine, Heather's mother, and I would work for Calvin. I was offered the position to start in serials and moved to science and engineering. Guyla Houston was hired to replace Calvin as serials librarian. The starting salary that year was $5,500, and if one's work warranted it, the second year would rise to $6,000. Also hired the summer of 1963 as an assistant documents librarian for Marguerite Howland and Mary Jane Smothers from Michigan. Mary Jane, Guyla, and I all had apartments in the brand new 3-story Scholars Inn when we came in the summer of 1963. In April 1965, I resigned from the library for a 2-year contract as an Army Special Services librarian in Ulm and later Munich, Germany. The Howlands had treated me like family when I was at OSU. Marguerite offered me the position as education librarian, and I began work in August of 1967. Mr. Lowe always called me Miss Jill. That seemed very Southern to me, and I found it charming then and now. David, what is your fondest memory at OSU, or at the library?
Well, I've been employed here 35 years, so I'm gonna have to. In 2013, a United Way fundraiser was the Smarty Pants contest, and so a ragtag team of library folks, including myself, won the Smarty Pants contest that year. That was a fond memory with some good friends of mine. And then, but what I guess really some meaningful moments have been, I had an opportunity to meet and visit briefly with Doris Kearns Goodwin, author, historian, and Ken Burns. Ken Burns was also in the library, and I had a chance to visit with him briefly. And I really appreciated those opportunities to visit with those folks who I greatly admire. So,
awesome. That is so cool. So we're going to take it back to Mr. Lowe. How we talked about how students can get involved now with jobs and stuff like that. But how could they get involved when the library was first operating?
So this building, this facility?
Yes.
Okay. So actually they participated greatly in the movement of the materials over here. The student labor was the muscle that moved all the books and materials to this building. Initially the library offered both employment, a place to study, but also it was kind of a social area because it was one of the 2 buildings on campus that was air conditioned. The student union was air conditioned and the library was air conditioned. And so it was a very popular place for students to gather just because it was cool here, especially in the summers and late spring and early fall. At the time when the building was open, there was no food allowed in the library. So it wasn't like they probably brought in, who knows, they probably brought in things in their backpacks. But it was a place just to sit and read and visit quietly with friends in a cool, nice environment. And so there was really a social atmosphere to the library for a number of students.
That is so cool. Is the library any different now from when it first opened?
So physically, it's changed some. The greatest change was the addition that was put onto the north side of the library in the early mid-'60s. And then also the library itself, the organization of the building, as these things came from the various locations on campus, they kept groupings together. And so like the biological sciences were kept in one area, and they had their own checkout for that area. They even had little gate turnstile things. So you go into the biological sciences area, and then you'd have to leave that area to go check out a book in the engineering area if you wanted a book from that area. So physically, there have been some changes in the facility. Probably the most dramatic, though, have been just the use of the building and how it's used. Initially you could have no food, but smoking was allowed in the restrooms. You couldn't smoke anyplace else, but you could smoke in the restrooms. There was also dress codes for students, and faculty and staff too. But women were required to wear dresses or skirts. They could not wear slacks or shorts. And even men were supposed to wear slacks in the library. Eventually, I think because of the number of ag boys wearing jeans, but they allowed men to wear jeans. But then they realized in the early 60s there was a loophole that men could wear shorts, but women couldn't. So in 63, they said now men can't wear shorts either. But those dress restrictions really stayed in effect until 67, 68, and then when Mr. Lowe leaves the library. But it was also a changing time on campus, and those things like dress codes in the late 60s were completely falling out. But yeah, for a number of years, women were required to wear dresses or skirts.
So for a while, we both would have been dress coded.
Oh yeah, we're both in violation.
We are both in violation. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So how did the new library impact OSU?
Well, one of the main, I think, advantages was the facility provided open shelving. So in the past, in the older library, only faculty had access to the shelves. Graduate students had to get special permission to get a permit to go back into the bookshelves, and undergraduates could not go back there. The only undergraduates who could go back there were student employees. This new facility provided the opportunity for anyone and everyone to browse the shelves. That was one of the innovations that Lowe had introduced, and it was becoming more and more common across the country, was this open shelving. The other thing too is by bringing all the materials together, there were still a few reading rooms or research rooms across campus, but by bringing it all together in one place, it really it reduced some of the costs because it reduced replication of materials. They had to have 2 copies, in different libraries. All of a sudden they have 4 or 5 copies. Anyway, reduced replication, reduced the costs, increased efficiency. And it really, I think that the facility itself, the kind of the majesty of the building at the center of campus, really created a new center for campus and an academic center for campus. The library has always seen itself as a service to all students. The College of Arts and Sciences kind of thinks of the Arts and Sciences students as theirs, and engineering students are theirs, but for the library, we see all students, and then our faculty and staff too, as the people we serve. So
awesome. What impact did Mr. Lowe have on other schools?
Well, he'd served, before he came here, when he left University of Michigan Graduate School, he had been hired at Bowling Green, and he served there as their director for 2 years. In fact, that was kind of the transition from him from graduate school, creating his professional life. So he has 2 years at Bowling Green, which he did very well. He then, is teaching at summer schools at the University of Michigan still, as Jill mentioned in her letter. And so he really, and also as he was preparing for the construction of this building, he visited a number of libraries across the country and was building relationships and conversing with other folks. And so he had quite an impact on a number of institutions just through the exchange of ideas as they were developing this facility and as they were managing this facility.
Awesome. David, you have been so awesome in helping us get to know Edmond Low better. Is there anything else you wanted to include before we sign off for the evening?
Oh golly, he was quite a remarkable gentleman. His birthday was January 4th, so his birthday was earlier this month. Part of the reason why I think the library is
Celebrating
this
him,
this month. But he was just a remarkable gentleman. He was born in Indian Territory, so he had roots in Oklahoma. And when he passed, he wanted to be buried in Stillwater. He saw Stillwater as his home. And so when he passed away, I think that was in about early 80s. The family brings his body back here, and he's buried in Stillwater, Oklahoma. He really was connected to this institution and this library, and really he's built a home for others in academia through his involvement with the OSU Library.
Awesome. It has been so cool to learn more about the man behind the name. I never really knew in college, really up until now, who Edmond Low was and all of his accomplishments. So it's really cool to learn about it. The library offers so many great services for students, and it offers so many great memories that we can make. I've also got a lot of great memories, and I just love the building so much. If you have any questions about Oklahoma State's archives, feel free to DM us at Oklahoma State University Archives on Facebook. Or if you want to learn more about OSU's archives, visit archives.library.okstate.edu. David, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to our audience for watching. As always, go Pokes!